Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. I am joined with Shadow the cat in my arms right here, and also joining me on the call once again is Robert. What is going on, Robert?
Not a whole lot. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Good to have you back on the show once again here. And Shadow, I'm now relinquishing from his duties of helping us introduce this show. We are here for part two, I guess. I guess it's a whole different show, really, at this point. But like, I had some of the stuff on the docket for episode 525. It's now episode 526. Having some issues with numbers lately. I have discovered screwed up the main feed, Robert. Left feeds to advantage here, but I got that back on track. So if you want to hear episode 524, you can hear episode 524 now. Episode 525 is out. This is episode 526. You can go back and listen to 524 because it's about the UFOs. So if you're interested in UFOs, UAPs, and all that sort of thing, I mean, I think that's an evergreen story. It's not like anything's really massively moved. Although, like, let's start right here is just like a little quick hot open since we're on the topic already. The actual government report or the summary of the report came out. Did you get a chance to take a look at it all, Robert?
No, work's been really crazy. What was in it?
Okay, so on episode 524, I sort of posited that if I had to take a guess of how many incidences they had, it'd be somewhere in like around 100 ish, and of which about 20 or so they'd be interested in, that they're particularly interested in, and that they didn't have good explanations for. And that's basically what they came down with 140 incidences. About 18 to 21 that really stand out to them because of unexplained velocities, and some real questions about how the things that were documented are possible and like what could possibly be behind them. However, of those 140, that then leaves about 120 that they do have what I'm just going to summarize as terrestrial explanations, weather balloons, misreadings, bad sensors, lights, drones. Like things that actually get talked about in unidentified. Like you can legitimately see like drones creating negative space that looks like a larger ship, but it's actually a cluster of drones working in a ring shape, or a cluster of drones in like a Twinkie shape, I guess, for lack of a better term, or a Tic Tac shape. That is
Or it's
possible, but
closer, or it's closer to the sensor than maybe they thought it was, and that makes it look bigger somehow.
yes, misreadings on the sensor, those sorts of things. About 20 of them they are still interested in, and the big thing that sticks out to me when I'm reading that report is that the government maintains interest in destigmatizing reporting by the military on the observation of these incidences. So prior to this, like around 2017 or 2018, they had already begun the process of quietly destigmatizing this. So there wasn't really like media news about this or a lot going on about it, but that there had been already a bit of an effort to get that kind of out in the open a little bit more among the military, and that process is being furthered. And I think the interesting question for those who think that there's a terrestrial explanation for this is why is the military currently taking the process of destigmatizing this? If it's like Bigfoot or something like that, Tulpas, which was brought up on the show here, the military probably wouldn't be taking these actions. So the question that remains for me is it a military, a state actor, someone who has this technology and has really leaped the United States military in a meaningful way, and that's what's prompting the military to say, hey, if you see this sort of stuff, please disclose it more often? Or is there something else going on that we don't have a good, I'll just say, terrestrial explanation for it, or a pedestrian explanation for it, or a common explanation for it at this point? I mean,
Well,
like,
yeah,
look, I can only hazard guesses, but I will say there's one. If you ask me for one that's like of this earth, like, look, there could be things that are actually like living inside the planet that we don't know about yet. I know it seems far fetched, but think about how deep the ocean is.
yeah,
Yeah, it's 70% of the planet. Like, I mean, it's far
Well,
fetched, but like there are limits to what man knows about even on the Earth itself. So like maybe there's a natural phenomenal explanation for it. Maybe there's a state actor explanation for it. Um, but there's this interesting lingering question of if it's nothing, or if it's more importantly like kind of like a prop op or something like that. Why would you need the military to report on it more? Like, why would you? And what would be the benefit of that?
well, yeah, during the Cold War, the USSR's military was largely made of paper mache and inflatables, but China is a much more serious threat. They're actually capable of doing stuff, as we see with them putting a helicopter on Mars.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, the Chinese and their Taikonaut program was, way behind the United States.
Yeah,
The part of the issue with the timeline here is the Nimitz carrier, right? Like, around that time, the Chinese were just starting the Taikonaut program. Like, they were just trying to get satellites and stuff up and everything. So, like, I mean, that's a hell of a smokescreen to be like, well, we don't really get space, but also we totally get space. I don't know. I'm comfortable saying I don't know. But I did want to at least open with that because we did finally get the report, and so I wanted to follow up. We had a passing here of note. Mike Gravel, the internet legend Mike Gravel, passed at 91 years old. Maybe, just maybe, Robert, 88 is too old for the presidency.
yeah, maybe,
Maybe.
uh, maybe.
um.
I think we're gonna find out.
Well, I mean, Biden would have been squeaking in, but when Gravel was running, he was like 88 or 89. Like that. That's what I'm playing at here. Look. I think what the Gravel teens did in getting in touch with Mike Gravel, basically building up Mike Gravel as an online brand for their sort of brand of leftism and everything is a real accomplishment. That being said, Mike Gravel is a really complicated character if you actually get into his political beliefs and everything. And like, while the Pentagon Papers and releasing the Pentagon Papers was really good and important, um, like at the same time in his 70s and 80s, he was chummy with Alex Jones and Lyndon LaRouche, and was a supporter of LaRouche PAC and was going on InfoWars. After Alex Jones had already done things like Newtown is a false flag. And I can't just wave that stuff away. Like, I think the type of person who goes on Alex Jones's show after Alex Jones is pushing lies about school shootings is a certain type
Not
of
great.
person.
It's not great.
Not great. Not great. So like, I, I come down real on the middle on the guy. I do certainly remember fondly some of like his 2008 presidential primary run where like he was yelling at Obama and yelling at Biden, and that
Yeah,
was fun.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
But one of the things we're seeing is that, for good or for ill, it could be pushing policies you like or policies you hate. But in the social media era, no one looks at the whole history. All they see is this moment and what's trending. And that's not great.
No, no, and I think the thing that worries me about that more is sort of like the flip side of that coin, which is that like sometimes people intensely care about one thing, while at the same time being able to turn a blind eye at some like serious warts. No, I mean the thing I want is for people to take the whole picture. So
Yeah.
if you look at a guy, hypothetically, if you looked at a Mike Gravel and you knew all this stuff and you're like, well, you got LaRouche PAC and the Alex Jones stuff, but I feel so strongly about his politics that that outweighs that. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Like, that's not where I would shake out on that. But like, I think that that's a sober assessment and like really ultimately all I can ask people to arrive at. But in this social media era, I really do have concerns that like basically that's not possible.
Yeah. At what point do people decide, hey, maybe I don't want to get in bed with this guy and wake up with his fleas? That's what happened with Trumpism. People cared about their one thing, and so the family values crowd was willing to get in bed with Trump. It was not good.
Well, that's a nice segue into our next topic here, which is Donald Trump was out in Ohio doing a rally here for Max Miller, who was someone who worked in the Trump administration. And he was talking about Max Miller as one of the good ones in reference to one of the good Republicans who were loyal to him,
Yeah.
and not one of the bad people who worked in his administration who stabbed him in the back. So, I
Yeah,
mean, Trump's
where have
making
we
it real
heard a
clear.
world where have we heard a world leader say be loyal above all else before, right? That's never gone poorly.
But here's the thing: the party still really refuses to break away from him. Mitt Romney is a guy who is still very much on an island when he's saying what he's saying here on Sunday morning. This
Yeah.
is not and Romney. Here's the thing. Here's my prediction: Romney's going to run, and Romney's going to get like thoroughly trounced. And it's the party is still very much in Trump's hands. And if it's going to be not Trump as the nominee, watching this rally, I just had the hardest time imagining a scenario where a person who isn't Donald Trump wins the nomination without Trump's more or less explicit blessing. Because I'm watching this rally and Trump's not really making headlines. And I'm watching the feedback on the news coverage, the mainstream news coverage, and they're like, Trump is boring, Trump is boring.
Yeah,
And
I think everybody's just sick of the guy at this point.
and Trump's gonna want to make news that gets the liberal media, the centrist media, like establishment media juiced up. And what gets the establishment media juiced up, because they do have a slightly liberal bias, is going to be Republican on Republican violence, specifically Trump on Republican violence.
Yeah,
And
cannibalism.
Trump is going to put two and two together here. And when that
Yeah,
happens, it is going to be fun and dangerous once
yeah.
again.
Well, and we've been all wondering, like, why doesn't McConnell actually give a crap about the January 6th and all this stuff Trump's doing? He hasn't really fought back, and I think it's because he has the courts. That's what matters.
I think it is that. I think you're basically right. The courts are the thing that mattered most to Mitch McConnell. It's his lasting legacy. It's his stamp on American government. Like this is not the Trump court. Like there's this editorial I'm going to slag on later that's like, the Trump court won't be so bad. This is the McConnell court,
Yeah,
and the
Trump
McConnell court
didn't
is
pick those guys.
calculating. They're hanging out and they're waiting. They're death by a thousand slices. In this sense, they won't be the Trump court, but like they're more dangerous in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
if you think that Trump dug deep in his phone book to find his picks for the Supreme Court, you're off base. Those were all McConnell picks.
okay, this is way hyper conjectural. There's a second Trump presidency because Biden loses. Does Trump try to pack the Supreme Court to get revenge on the conservative justices who betrayed him?
I don't think so. I think he wants to get into the grift harder because he doesn't have to worry about being reelected. And what he cares about is the grift. That's why him and McConnell got along.
No, and
McConnell
he's
could
he's a
run
path
for
of least resistance guy. Like, no, I can answer my own question too. I wanted to have some
yeah,
fun there. Of like Trump
yeah.
packing the court despite
It
Neil
would be
Gorsuch.
funny
Yeah,
in a horrifying way.
yeah. But no, I don't think he would either. But
But so Chris, hey Chris,
yes.
if that happened, do you think the Democrats would take opposing Trump seriously, or would Susan Collins still be concerned and Nancy Pelosi be release a sternly worded tweet?
So here's where I increasingly come down on this. Um, of course, we know that the octogenarian leadership of the Democratic Party leaves a lot to be desired, and that position is well documented on this show. But they're not going to do shit if rank and file Democrats are not pissed off about this in a focused way and
Yeah,
all basically screaming one thing like Breyer retire, Breyer retire. I mean,
that might be good.
no, I mean just to throw one out there, right?
Yeah,
But like if there is not outrage from us, the voting class, demanding a thing of the Democratic Party, we're going to get what they're serving up for dinner. And we all know that what they serve up for dinner is not very good. So I guess,
yeah.
like, I don't get what we wait around for sometimes. You know what I mean?
Uh,
Like I don't want to say that, I'm not trying to let them off the hook, right?
no,
But
no.
like I do think that like if you really buy into a representative system of democracy as like a tenable way of governing, right? Like in my mind, it has to also include the democratic base. Like by democratic, I mean like small d, like the voting base, actually like voicing a normal concern or like a sustaining concern, not a normal
Yeah,
concern, sustaining concern over and over again. And right now, it seems like we're really just stuck in this moment where it's like we don't really want gun reform and we don't really want like a new healthcare bill. And like I don't even know that we really want infrastructure spending. Like is that a national sentiment thing or is that like a DC thing that they're trying to tell us that we want? Like it's not that I
yeah,
don't want that, right? It's
yeah.
that I don't walk down the street and talk to people going like, "It's infrastructure week." You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
The guy at work isn't talking about infrastructure week.
No, I mean, I think the guy at work right now is a little shell shocked from coronavirus. It's been a long
And Trump.
18 months that
Oh,
and we're not out of that yet.
no.
So, um,
Although the good news about these Trump rallies is 90% of people with the in the hospital with Delta variant are, unvaccinated. So those Trump rallies, this may take care of itself. They get sick and then they believe it.
I mean, here's where I think this plays out, right? Like, I'm with you in the sense that 4 years or like 3.5 years is a very long time with the global coronavirus numbers being what they are for a chunk of America to go unvaccinated and really be able to deny the trend line that like your friends keep going to the hospital because they don't want to get the vaccine for the
Yeah,
Delta variant. Like, I I think at a certain point, yes, it even starts to break the will of some of the Republicans. But the thing that I think I was hopeful about, and that like I think a lot of us were hopeful about, is that like these cognitive dissonances would eventually sort of create where the truth will win out. Like the thing that people optimistically say, like I believe that the truth will win out.
yeah.
Um,
I'm still waiting.
I don't know that I believe that anymore. I believe that the strong survive, and sometimes strong bullshit overcomes the truth.
Just stupid strength. Strong and
It's
stupid.
right, strong and wrong. Like sometimes wrong is so strong that it beats up truth, and truth is strong. Truth is
Yeah,
really like sky is blue is unbelievably strong because I can look at it and say sky is blue, but sometimes there is, in the Nietzschean terms, the will to power on wrong that you can
yeah,
like really sort of force it on.
yeah,
And if not on to go from Nietzsche to W.C. Fields, you can fool some of the people all the time, but you can fool some of the people all of the time. Is
yeah.
the part that I want
Well,
to zero in on there.
well, and if you're the I left Fox News because they're the radical left for OAN, you're going to be really hard to approach with the truth and get anywhere. You're
I
just wasting your time.
The person who's left Fox News for OAN has already told you what they want out of life, right? What they want is the soothing narrative. And they've already told you, like us, the if I like looked at the viewership of OAN, I know basically to a person, unless they're a reporter whose job is to document what's going on in OAN and report it to all the rest of us and be like, look, there's this crazy shit on OAN. Like, God love those people. That's the Lord's work, right? um, but to a person, everyone who's watching OAN, almost necessarily so, has to be saying, I want fiction. I want the fictional version of American politics, because Fox was, and that damn Chris Wallace and that Shepard Smith, before we finally got rid of him, they were just too honest. Neil Cavuto would sometimes like go like, no, dude, Trump's really fucking wrong on this.
Yeah.
No, when someone switches from Fox to OAN, they're telling you straight up they want to live in gaslight America.
Yeah.
And that, like, that is dangerous.
And
Going back to the COVID thing as a public health concern, in gaslight America, if the gaslight outlets say that COVID's a hoax, gaslight America believes that.
there's enough of those people to create real problems.
There's enough of those people that actually, the herd immunity that they like think that they believe in. They're actually the people who stop the herd immunity from being possible, because there's just enough of them that like they prevent herd immunity from being a thing that we can do here in America.
Absolutely.
It's really frustrating. Okay, so here's an interesting thing that I don't want to say like interesting, because like it's a tragedy. There's a building collapse in Florida this week. There are over 100 people still missing. 9 people have been recovered so far. They have moved from rescue to recovery at this point. There have been some sounds of people surviving in pockets and stuff, and people can survive in pockets up to 7 days. Like building collapses do occasionally have small miracles, but like, I mean, this is scary stuff. And they're talking about evacuating the other building next to it because it appears that this is a failure of concrete structures. God, like, this has been like a quick microcosm of all the things that have been bad in American politics in 20 years. You had like people doing video analysis of the building collapse and telling you that it was an inside job to get Infrastructure Week off the ground. You're like,
Well, yeah, and there was so much of that stuff happening that I just stopped paying attention to it because I didn't have the time.
no, the first time I knew that that was coming, and I was like, oh, okay, gotta walk away from this story for a bit here, because like I cannot live in people dissecting what is a building collapse into, wow, thermite explosions on the steel beams. Like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going back there again. I can't do this, architects and engineers for Florida truth. But
We are so primed for conspiracy theory about everything right now.
everything now, it is very, very I mean, and this is, we're talking about 9/11 truthing and stuff. In this climate, imagine a 9/11 style terrorist attack again, and the way that QAnon would latch onto that, like pizza. I mean, if you thought Pizzagate was bad or whatever, I mean, if they did a QAnon job on some like real serious international terror attack inside the United States that was domestic.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, no, those conspiracies would spread like wildfire. It'd be very,
Well,
very.
yeah, how much of what we're seeing now comes from 9/11 and the Patriot Act, and you know, how much of this is butterfly effect from that, I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is the whole Mark Twain line. Let us live in just a series of aphoristic quotes today. But the Mark Twain line about like how history doesn't repeat, but it sometimes rhymes. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you have these little moments where you're like, oh yeah, I do see this little through line. I guess that's how Bruce Carlson, the fabulous Bruce Carlson, makes a living, right? Um, so, anyways, here's where I wanted to come at this from. The building collapse to me is really, again, I hate saying interesting, but I had like a moment where I was like, well, this is going to be the first time that Ron DeSantis and Joe Biden actually have to interact. And DeSantis, the presidential hopeful here, he's been running really hot right now. I mean, he's getting the build up. There was an editorial that just got ran in the Hill. It's like, is Ron DeSantis the new Reagan? He's getting build up. Robert, I'm very worried that, well, I'm not worried. I'm hoping that Trump comes out and says that Ron DeSantis has become a bit of a rock star at some point, because bad things happen when Trump says you're a rock star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Rock
getting
star is
too
the
much.
prelude to bad things happening.
You're getting too much oxygen. Let me just cut that off for
Yes.
you.
Yeah, stars fall. Stars fall and disintegrate and hit the asphalt, baby.
Well, and DeSantis is in a unique position, I think, to straddle getting the support of Trump supporters and the support of people who don't like Trump but are right leaning.
Absolutely.
And so, Trump may try to cut him off at the knees just so he can grift.
I mean, if you look at the, I'm gonna I'm gonna call them the more serious conservative media, like not MAGA, like the type of, they're the anti-Trump conservative media. Like National Review, kind of the shtick
Yeah.
that they're trying to do. They try to make it academic. They try to, sophisticate up the conservatism. They will
Use
find,
words of 3 syllables.
yeah, oh, you have to use big words. And yeah, there has to be like kind of like complicated, like originalist, lots of isms, lots of isms. There's originalism and constitutionalism and things that have four
And
or five.
ologies too. All lots of ologies as well.
Yes, lots of ologies. So I see them finding a way to absolutely love Ron DeSantis. I think they would have liked Nikki Haley too, but I think Ron DeSantis seems to be the person they're gravitating towards. DeSantis has done uh, a job. I'm not even going to say a good job, but he's certainly done a job on trying to sanitize his COVID-19 record. And I think he didn't have, compared to Trump, he is going to seem moderate to the Republican electorate. And more importantly, I guess the best way I could describe DeSantis is he'll be like Trump, but he won't embarrass them. And that was the
Yeah.
one thing they didn't like about, like when they said they didn't like Trump's tweets, what they were saying is they didn't like how Trump embarrassed them sometimes.
Yeah, like Nikki Haley, the thing that she did was she bought in too hard on the crazier stuff of Trumpism, you know?
I think it's hard to work in the administration, because the thing that DeSantis was able to do is he was able to put out that ad where he's like, "I'm teaching my kid MAGA" as like his first word, but he never actually had to like work in the White House with Trump.
Yeah.
And working in the White House with Trump was basically impossible because Trump would like embarrass you in the end.
Yeah.
And that Haley's mistake, and the other presidential hopefuls who tried to go through the White House's mistake was, you can't be that close to the sun.
Yeah.
He'll burn you. Speaking of
Yeah.
stars, no, the sun burns you. DeSantis
Yeah.
found a way to be in orbit, and also right now, DeSantis has been doing Trump favors with Mar-a-Lago and tax protections and other things, and like, no,
Trying to buy that. He's in Florida, so he can try to buy that endorsement.
yes, no, like there's a lot of, there are opportunities for DeSantis. So it's interesting because he's now going to have to interact with Biden potentially, or have to go through a news cycle with Biden, where he basically is going to have to just be nice to Joe Biden all week. And in Republican spheres, that's impossible because Joe Biden is a phantom president who is being propped up by a series of drugs and like a team of 50. So like the sin here will be that DeSantis is not going after Joe Biden when there's like basically nothing to go after Joe Biden for,
So does
Go ahead.
DeSantis spend a week playing hide the Biden to avoid the issue?
Yes. The teachable moment here when we talk about history repeating and rhyming, Chris Christie and Barack Obama in 2013 when the floods happened. Remember? Just
Yeah.
hugging Barack Obama and thanking Obama for coming out and helping out with a natural disaster. What was a price to pay for Chris Christie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about any of the other things that might have done him in along the way here, but man, for me, it goes back to the second he hugged Obama, it was over for him with the Republican voters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They want blood. They don't want handshakes and hugs.
No, so that's DeSantis has to play hide. Maybe he has to play hide the Ron. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like if I were advising Biden, and if I was on Biden's team, we'd be flying out to Florida this week, and people were like, "We're here to help. Infrastructure Week's here. We want to do a building audit and help reinforce all these buildings. The people of Florida need to know that they are living in safe buildings, and we want to pass new regulation." I mean, I would put DeSantis. I would certainly get DeSantis on the back pedal and be like, "We don't need regulations for buildings." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm talking about this obviously from a tragedy standpoint.
Yeah.
I feel, yeah, from a politics standpoint, this is the game, right? You
Yeah,
start going, no, no, no. We need regs.
yeah.
Clearly. We
But
need to be doing building inspections. Clearly. We need to reinforce these buildings. We need money coming to Florida to help build new buildings so that people can live in safe, state-of-the-art infrastructure. Right, Ron? Right, Ron? Don't you want that money, Ron?
yeah, but right now the Democrats have proven that they will not go knives out. They don't know how. The
No.
octogenarians just don't know how.
No.
Like send
And plus,
AOC down there to do that. You know, she went down there.
she seems like she'd be the only one. I mean, she seems to be. She's the one person trying to push Biden. Even Bernie and Warren. They're look. Bernie has found a way to get himself. Unfortunately, having to work with Joe Manchin on this new.
Well, you know what I think Bernie's problem is?
But
He
yes,
he could not turn a pandemic into a conversation about Medicare for all during a primary, and
how do you,
he's too old to run again. It's
how do you not also turn that into more of a sustaining conversation with the Democratic Party once the Democrats win in November, though, too? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could at least have at minimum, right? If you can't do M4A, how about like a Medicare expansion down to 50?
yeah,
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 no,
or 55.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, at minimum, starting the conversation on that and try and at least ferret out who is not even in support of that. Obviously, Manchin and Cinema, but like, let's figure out Mark Warner. Who are the other sticky wickets here?
Yeah.
Because getting Medicare down to 55 shouldn't be that hard at this point.
Well, and even before that, he kind of had a problem similar to Trump. I mean, I liked the guy and supported his policies, but he could get people to show up for a rally, but he couldn't explain to you how he was going to get legislation passed.
And then when it comes to like what we're talking about here with DeSantis, right? Like I just couldn't see a President Bernie going down and bringing the heat on DeSantis about we're gonna build in your state, Ron, and putting the screws to DeSantis, which I think like AOC does have an eye for and does get that like this is as much like look the policy is part of the game, but the actual like strategy here and the politics are part of the game too. And in this sense, the politics
You
are.
don't get you don't get to put policy in place if you can't win elections.
No, or if the court's going to get struck down. The court's going to strike down everything you want to do. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
not winning elections and having a court that strikes you down, which is caused by not winning elections, is a big problem to getting policies that you want. But like, in this case, you do have to go after the tall weed. I think that the Democrats would be smart to essentially be playing whack-a-mole here right now because Biden is not a strong candidate. I think, he's not a weak candidate. It's a really easy, are you better off now than 4 years ago framing on this.
Well, I don't think he was a strong candidate in 2020. I think it was all COVID and Trump, and people were tired of it.
So, I do think, I tend to believe a little bit of that too. So he'll have incumbency in his favor. He'll have, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago in his favor, but he'll have those things not in his favor. So you got to weigh those two. And I mean, look, that's complicated. So if I were the Democrats and I was thinking maybe it's this, but maybe it's also this, I'd be playing whack-a-mole on every single Republican tall weed coming up from here until the primary season starts so that when you get in there, it's 13 little dwarfs. It's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I'm not, trying to, I'm not trying to be
No,
insensitive.
if the old guard Democrats were serious about going knives out, they'd send Harris to Florida to just eviscerate Ron.
Yes, yes, and you hear. So now to kind of give a grade on Harris going down to the border. Look, I said the way to win the game is not to play, but let us grade on her playing the game. So like, I guess that's like when you turn the assignment in late, so you have to get scored down at a C. But like, or maybe scored out at like a B possible. I do think that she was smart to not play too much into the Republican framing and be like, we need to address the root causes of immigration and like and kind of keep going back to foreign policy and defend her Guatemala speech. The most important thing, no, I mean it's important. It was important for her to not give ground on that stuff.
And saying if you want to attack immigration, you need to look at what we've done to Mexico and Central and South America with drug cartels and our post Cold, the Cold War foreign policy couldn't be more dead on. But she, nobody believes she believes that stuff.
I mean, in this sense too, she's damned if she does and damned if she doesn't. Look, is that the trade-off? Maybe. I go back and forth. She is one of the hardest people in American politics for me to like. I never. She's a hard one to put a finger on sometimes. Like that,
Really.
how I feel about her. Yeah, it's all the words always sometimes elude me.
No, she's absolutely a chameleon, and her record, like in California, versus it just is what it is. She doesn't seem to believe anything.
Yeah. Which is alarming. If anything though, she seems like a reverse cinema in the sense that if anything, she seems to have drifted ever so slightly to the left instead of cinema, who's drifted like to the right. So I
Well,
guess
yeah, we're so polarized that you have to drift one way or the other, or you're not going to get anywhere. Like we said, they don't want hugs; they want blood. So, if you go to prison, you've got to pick a side.
I mean, this again. We need more of this for the Democratic Party, though. Like the electorate, we need more of the. I mean, essentially, like we complain about bipartisanship. I think it's important for me to talk about bipartisanship, and what's wrong with it, because if people aren't talking about bipartisanship and the failures of this strategy, this is going to be the strategy that everyone, including our favorite politicians, try to default to because being nice is nice.
Yeah. Well, look at how many people were mad at AOC for speaking with Justin Amash.
I know, I know, I so weird, so weird. I know. All right, so I feel like we covered. Oh, okay. Let's talk about the Capitol riots here a little bit. I did have this here. So we've got some developments in the Capitol riots, domestic terror attack. Leave the nomenclature open. 1/6, right?
Yeah.
First, we had no jail time for the first Capitol riot defendant sentenced. I'm here, best day ever. We stormed the Capitol building. Me and Dana Blassie or Dona Bissy were the first 50 people and said Morgan Lloyd on Facebook. A judge handed down the first federal court sentence to a defendant in the January 6th Capitol riot Wednesday, sparing an Indiana grandmother jail time after she admitted entering the Capitol illegally that day. Anna Morgan Lloyd, who is 49. I mean, so again, we're calling her a grandma. You know what I mean? Like, when you call someone a grandmother and you're invoking that in the case of sentencing, like, the implication to me is like she's like 70, 65,
Yeah.
absolute minimum. Right?
Yeah. She's
49.
a grandmother in the you can get married at 15 logic.
And and again, I don't. It's not even about like life choices scolding here. It's that like if she was 49 and just like married or unmarried, which are also equally as likely, we would not be
Yeah.
like, well, gee golly, how could we send her to prison? She's 49. Like, no, come on now. She was sentenced to serve 36 months probation and perform 120 hours of community service and pay $500 in restitution for damages incurred when the demonstrators supporting Donald Trump stormed the Capitol in a bid to block Congress from certifying Joe Biden's victory in the November election. That last sentence is really important. It occurred when demonstrators supporting Donald Trump stormed the Capitol in a bid to block Congress from certifying Joe Biden's victory in the November election. Like, the one thing that they are getting in court over and again is the clear admission by people, sometimes someone like even Anna Morgan Lloyd here cooperated, that she did this specifically to overturn the results of the election, thus making it absolutely a terror attack. They were trying to affect a political outcome, a clear political outcome here. Uh,
Yeah.
what is crazy to me is she only faced a maximum possible sentence, 6 months in prison. Prosecutors didn't seek jail time. In this case, look, if the maximum is only 6 months and you can get her to cooperate and get her to do other, you know what I mean? Like, it's worth the
Yeah.
trade-off to me here.
That's important.
Yeah,
If she's cooperating so they can go after the bigger fish, then that's a big win. And the other thing is people approach it from the standpoint of wanting these really harsh sentences for everyone, like say black people get, instead of saying no, we need to like the lower down people. It should be equal, but not as oppressive. Now this is different, obviously, but those are the two angles that I kind of see here, and I think it's too soon to know how it's going to play out. But people are afraid nothing's going to happen.
I am obviously not unsympathetic. That's a double negative. I am sympathetic to the people who think that sentencings, broadly speaking, are too harsh, right? And that we need to reduce sentencing times, broadly speaking, for any number of crimes across the board on state, local, and federal levels.
But not here, maybe.
No, no, I mean, here's my thing, man, and this is not about, like, let us punish MAGA. Like, there has to be a line of stuff that, like, you should do real jail time to, and the only thing that will actually have it. I really do believe in this case that there would be a chilling effect if people who were involved in the domestic terror attack, because when you are storming the Capitol to attack lawmakers to stop them from certifying the results of an election, that is domestic terrorism. Yes, you should do hard time for terrorism, and yes, it should be a message. And I honestly think that it should be a shocking, like, it should be a shock across the bow. You know, if you believe in white privilege, I think part of white privilege here is this errant belief that it's right and good that Anna Morgan Lloyd was really only facing like 6 months, like, you know, and maybe if she was doing 6 months, that was a bit harsh. White privilege is thinking that that's okay. When the reality is these same white people have thought that it's been perfectly acceptable to detain tons and tons of brown people at Guantanamo Bay without a trial, and in other places and in black sites. And I'm not endorsing that either. But, like, we have taken a stance, and there is precedent about how the U.S. government feels about terrorism. And even if you don't want to go there, let's go to Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh went to fucking prison, and rightly so, over incarceration on drug stuff, over incarceration on crack cocaine versus white cocaine. I mean, look, I can talk about sentencings being way over the line on any number of things, but, like, guys, if someone tries to blow up the governor, like blow up the governor's limousine to change the results of the election, that person needs to go to jail. Otherwise, you start opening the door to a society you don't want to live in, where we get elected officials killed on the regs because you're only doing 6 months.
Yeah, if a lot of people are saying that, and I think it's true.
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember one time I was doing jury duty, and I got asked, they asked us like a three-way question where it's like, do you believe that justice is about deterrence, rehabilitation, or punishment? And, like, they were going around, like, the entire, like, jury pool or whatever. Everyone was having this one clear answer. I am sitting there, and I've got, like, my head in my hands because I'm like, sometimes it's about this, but sometimes it's about this. Sometimes, like, you know, sometimes it's not about rehabilitating a domestic terrorist. Sometimes it's just about punishing them. I mean, and sometimes it's not about rehabilitating the domestic terrorist. Sometimes it's about just deterring terrorism, and setting lines in the sand of saying, like, child rape is not acceptable. And it's not about necessarily rehabilitating the child rapist, because we know statistically that rehabilitation rates on that are low. Like, I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was agonizing over this, and I think I answered rehab, but, like, I was just like, rehab.
It seems so simple when they ask you, and so complicated when you try to answer.
I think what alarmed me more, man, is that when they were going around the room, it wasn't more of like a brain teaser for others, because to me it just seemed like taking this question seriously and, like, doing various scenarios, like, you know, with the thief, like if it's someone who's like a car thief, right? There are different motivations for car theft, and so different formulas of, are we just punishing someone, or are we really rehabilitating them? You know, like, are they a drug addict and they were doing the car theft because they were addicted to drugs, and if they weren't addicted to drugs, then they wouldn't be stealing the cars? Or are they someone who just, like, likes to fucking work angles in this life? And we know these people. The guy you can't trust around the cash register. You just can't. And it's not because any reason. It's because there are just some people in this life who just shouldn't be trusted around the reg. in that case, like you have to have the fly swatter and swat their hand away from the register, and you're not trying to fix them. You're just trying to
Or
make sure that they're not putting their hand in the register.
or
Um,
when they overthrow the government, they need to go away and not be part of the group anymore.
yeah, at bare minimum, and I want them to get convicted so that they lose their voting rights for a while.
That would be
Like, and
cool.
if they think that stinks, well, gee golly, let me tell you about prisoners losing their voting rights and the hurdles that they have to go through to get those back, even after they serve their time. Um,
I'd like to introduce you to Florida.
a
You
little,
voted.
a little dabble, do ya, of your own medicine. Um, one other story here. What planet are they on? A judge blasts Republicans for downplaying the attack on the U.S. Capitol. This is more essentially from that story, but this is from Reuters now. I'm especially troubled by the accounts of some members of Congress that January 6th was just a day of tourists walking through the Capitol, said Judge Royce Lamberth during a court hearing in Washington. I don't know what planet these people are on. Lamberth was appointed by Ronald Reagan, a hero of the Republican Party, and said that millions of people saw what he called a disgrace to the country. The attempt by some congressmen to rewrite history and say this was all just tourists walking through the Capitol is utter nonsense. It was not an accident that it turned violent, he said of the Capitol attack. It was intended to draw to a halt the very functioning of our government. So again, here what is important is a judge saying yet again, this is people trying to stop the function of government. If you blow up a courthouse, that's terrorism. If
Yeah.
you try to stop Congress, that's terrorism. Lambert didn't name any particular legislator during his remarks because he's a classy dude, but Andrew Clyde, a dude I hadn't even heard mentioned in the miasma of Republican representatives who boost this because there are actually so many that I lose count now. Like, there's Paul Gosser, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene, there's Hallie, there's Cruz, Mark Meadows, obviously there's Andrew Clyde guy. I'm up to five. You know what I mean? Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of people, and Matt Gaetz, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, who else? A lot of people bought into this big lie thing. One
Yeah.
last thing from. Here's some more from Clyde. Watching the footage of those who entered the Capitol and walking through Statuary Hall show people in an orderly fashion staying between the stanchions and ropes, taking videos and pictures, Clyde said. If you didn't know the TV footage was video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit. That sentence is actually even more kind of confusing because it's like if you
I
didn't
know.
know it was a terror attack, you'd think it was a tour. You were thinking a tour.
Cut, cut to the QAnon shaman, and the guy was zip ties.
Look, if you didn't know 9/11 was a terror attack, you just think that those guys weren't very good pilots.
Yeah, hey, I took flying lessons. It didn't go very well. What do you want from me? Come on.
Uh, and they went to Florida for those flying lessons. Uh, Speaking of which, actually, that's a really fun segue. I didn't even plan that one out. And you might go, "Oh, that wasn't a very tasteful joke," but it's a tasteful segue that I'm now involved in here. Four Saudi operatives who killed Jamal Khashoggi received paramilitary training in the United States 1 year before doing it. The training of the Saudi Royal Guard was approved by the State Department and provided by Tier 1 Group, an Arkansas based security company, under a license first issued in 2014, which continued through at least the first year of Trump's term. Khashoggi was strangled and dismembered in 2018 after he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. The CIA concluded that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman directed the operation. Trump bragged that he protected the prince from Congress after ordering the assassination of Khashoggi. Two other notes on that. During the Kavanaugh hearings, he said that he believed that Kavanaugh was as innocent as Mohammed bin Salman. So take that for what you will. And then, of course, Joe Biden, let's not forget, got handed this whole information about Khashoggi and was just like, I mean, he did it. He did it. We're not going to do anything, but he did it. Which is one of those weird rulings that I don't think happens in court very often.
Yeah, there's just so much going on right now. It's like you're trying to prioritize what you want to deal with is just really hard to do. I mean, Yeah,
Dude,
there's so much.
there are various threads like Myanmar. I keep going. I need to circle back around to Myanmar and go like, what the hell is going on over there? We did obviously the episode when the coup began, but like, where do
Yeah,
things stand right now? I to
the
be honest,
Uyghurs, remember them?
yeah, I mean the Uyghur situation, yeah, but like no, we need follow ups and all those sorts of things too. Those will be coming here in July for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe even before we hit the end of the month here, depending on how
But
frisky
this
I
is
feel.
it. It's all just a lot. It's just so much, and like even trying to just follow is nuts. Never mind trying to like. If I were trying to prioritize what to do something about, I don't know where I'd begin. I mean,
In this sense, I am sort of sympathetic to the administration's not non-desire to go after the Saudis right now. There are so many different things like to deal with. Whether you're talking about the nuclearization of North Korea, which because of what Trump did in this whole like I'm going to hug Kim Jong Un, I mean I thought it was inevitable anyways, right? So I don't want to lay it down at the door of Trump, but like
he
Trump
set it
clearly
up.
he fucked up. Yeah, like, he fucked up. There's no other. I mean, like Republicans and the sophisticate conservatives will try to put a spin on it, but like no, he fucked up. I
Yeah,
mean, he trusted Kim Jong Un when you couldn't trust Kim Jong Un.
yeah, and that's not a hard call to make that we shouldn't trust this guy.
No, no. I mean, I'm not. That doesn't mean don't make a deal, but like Trump went way beyond make a deal. Trump was trying to have a friendship and a charm offensive with Kim Jong Un, whereas Kim Jong Un was like, "I'm going to be in office way after you're gone. You may be the head of the most powerful country in the world, but I have longevity." 20
Yeah,
years from now, unless he strokes out from cigarettes and obesity, he'll still be sitting on his chair. Uh, Trump already gone, already gone.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they don't work on the same clock as we do.
The bosses come and go, but the game is forever.
Yeah. So I get it. I get how like Biden's got to deal with China, the coronavirus. I mean, the Saudi thing, and it's a complicated situation. It messes up the Middle East. Is the Middle East even the biggest problem right now on the U.S. in the U.S. portfolio of foreign policy? I think the biggest problem is probably China. You have China who has not been forthright about not the. I don't want to get into like it was a secret bioweapon or anything. Like I'm just saying like the TikTok, not the website, the TikTok of what they knew when they knew it about COVID-19, particularly in fall and December, and the fact that there is a mounting case of evidence that supports
Yeah,
that they knew far more than they were letting on to the entire global community. And that matters because this is not the last pandemic, and this pandemic is not over even. So,
yeah,
like, we need to get China, and by we, I mean, like, the world needs China with their 1.5 billion people to be forthright with the global community on matters of global health. And
yeah.
I would argue that maybe that's the biggest foreign policy challenge for all of the world right now. India, for their part, like Modi does, like live in a bit of a nihilist world, but like India did, did not seem to be hiding stuff in the same way.
Yes.
So maybe they
Well, and
will
that's
in the
why,
future. I think they'll have a hard time though because of the decentralization of the Indian government. The big thing
yeah,
is going to be heavily centralized China and their silencing campaigns, and it's one thing to silence inside their own borders, but there are things that they are going to try to silence on that have global implications, and it's going to be dangerous for all of us.
well, yeah, that's why I think we're doing things like building chip fabs here in America, is because one of the really important lessons of COVID is that having all of your manufacturing have a choke point for stuff made by China is a huge problem from a national security standpoint.
I mean, a big part of the semiconductor shortage here that, like I follow, especially like kind of in my investment life, if you really get down to it, a big part of it goes back to China trying to get really heavily into semiconductors themselves and being kind of stingy on rare earths. Um, Theoretically, they could loosen up the market again. Theoretically, I don't think they will. I think we are now in a semiconductor war, so to speak. Um, which and like, look, I think it's good and important that we decouple our manufacturing from China. And I think that it was always a mistake to. I think it's immoral from a labor standpoint to offshore your labor production. But from a geostrategy standpoint, it's a major strategic mistake to offshore your labor to
Yeah.
China, of all
Well, it's not
places.
trade, it's just currency manipulation. That's all it is.
Mm.
You're just making it over there because the trade, the dollar trades in a way that it's labor is worth nothing to us over there, and so it's cheaper to make it there and then ship it to Mexico to be finished and then bring it here. But it's not about trade or manufacturing, it's just currency manipulation.
And all the while, the Chinese government was sort of like basically waiting their time, biding their time. You know what I mean? Like yeah, just stop piling their chips. You know, I guess they're semiconductor chips, but I'm talking about like like their money. Like as we kept sending jobs over there, we were like, oh yeah, we're getting great exchange rates. Oh, it's great. China's great. They're blah blah. And oh, by the way, like this is gonna change them. Don't worry. I know you guys are worried that China has nuclear weapons and that they're trying to develop a space program and like they're getting pretty sophisticated computers and they seem to have a national surveillance system for 1.5 billion people and a social credit score. I know you're worried about all those things, but don't worry. We're changing them with capitalism.
Yeah,
Um,
I know that they've been an authoritarian part of the world for the last 6,000 years, but Richard Nixon is really smarter than all that. He's got this on lock. Let's just go with what he wants.
This is a country with an imperial tradition, an expansionist tradition, a strongman tradition, whether it is kings and emperors, and also necessarily so. This is why, like the Boxer. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify the last 75 years of Chinese communist history here, but like part of the reason why like the Boxer Rebellion was sort of like get doomed to end up in like Maoism or someoneism is because like democracy is sort of a learned thing. Like, I mean, it's one thing that like when we did the Jonah Goldberg thing, that I think one thing that Goldberg got totally right is like why did it stick in America? It's because everyone who was coming over here was kind of like that was a seed that was in their head when they were coming over. You had like-minded settlers. Um, so like I mean, and I think why doesn't it take in some of these communist revolutions? Well, I don't think you can just go from monarchy to communism, a dictatorship of the proletariat. I think what happens is when you do that, you end up in dictatorship.
Yeah.
You get
Yeah,
half the way there.
when you have a dictatorship, you get a dictatorship.
Also, I mean, also true, right?
You
Like
know,
how long can
you
you centralize power before you have centralized power?
yeah, I mean, sooner or later, the best government in the world's a benevolent dictator, but sooner or later that guy dies.
every Marcus Aurelius yields a Commodus. All right, so going back to the Justice Department here, Merrick Garland backed away from a comprehensive review of the actions by the Trump Justice Department. Once again, the Biden administration really running away from the bigger issues here. Garland noted, however, that the department's inspector general was already investigating related issues, including leak hunts, attempts to overturn the election, and whether Trump had improperly used the department's power to investigate and prosecute. Just one note of a thing that they might want to look into. Trump asked aides in 2019 to look at what the Justice Department and the FCC could do to punish Saturday Night Live and other late night shows for mocking him. I'm bringing this one, not because it's major, but because it is extraordinarily petty. I want to be clear here. He watched a rerun of Saturday Night Live in March of 2019, and then Trump tweeted that the episode was, quote, not funny / no talent, and that kept, quote, knocking the same person, in parentheses me, over and over without so much of a mention of, quote, the other side. Because when someone's doing an impersonation of you, you need to be fair and balanced and show the other side. He then asked, quote, should Federal Elections Commission and or FCC look into this? According to people familiar with the matter, after tweeting that, Trump then asked advisors and lawyers about what the FCC, the court systems, and the Department of Justice could do to investigate the shows. Trump had to repeatedly be advised that the shows are satire, which is a form of protected speech.
That's not surprising at all.
I mean,
There's no part of that that's in any way surprising.
right? Like this, what should be shocking to people is that we are at a point where this is like does not beggars belief in the slightest. Like the Donald Trump we all know, absolutely 100% would watch a rerun of something making fun of him and go like, "How can I get revenge on those bastards?"
Yeah. Well, and like you were saying before, look at should we deal with Saudi Arabia or Saturday Night Live? I don't, it's kind of a toss up. It's hard to pick one. They're basically the same, right? Both sides.
Okay, now to pivot to more serious things that I do think needs to be looked into, right? It involves Mark Meadows here. This is fairly wordy. Let me read a little bit of this. This is from Keep Track, a subreddit on Reddit that does really well sourced stuff. They're not doing as much during the Biden admin. I wish they would do more. But the stuff during the Trump admin was really well done. On December 14, 2020, electors in each state certified that the Electoral College votes. It was also the day that Trump announced that Bill Barr would be resigning and be replaced by Jeffrey Rosen. Newly obtained emails revealed that less than an hour earlier, Trump sent an email to Rosen with talking points claiming, quote, intentional fraud and corruption of the voting machines in Michigan. The email documents concluded that Michigan cannot certify for Biden. Trump then urged the Justice Department to file a lawsuit with the Supreme Court to nullify the election using official channels and a private attorney to pressure DOJ officials. This is probably might be Rudy, might be the other one, Sidney Powell. On December 29th, Trump sent Rosen, the acting deputy AG, Richard Donahue, and the acting Solicitor General, Jeffrey Wall, to draft a lawsuit asking the court to declare that the Electoral College votes were cast in Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania cannot be counted. It just so happens that Trump lost those 6 states. The same day, December 29th, private attorney Kurt Olson contacted Jeffrey Rosen's chief of staff on behalf of Trump to urge him to file the lawsuit. Olson represented Texas in its failed Supreme Court challenge to the results in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. This is the guy who did this in lieu of Ted Cruz, who wanted to do it, by the way. Thank you for calling me on behalf of AG Rosen. Attached is a draft complaint to be brought by the United States modeled after the Texas action. As I said on our call, the President of the United States has seen this complaint, and he directed me last night to brief AG Rosen in person today and discuss bringing this action. I have been instructed to report back to the President this afternoon after this meeting. Trump tweets on December 29th, when are we going to be allowed to do signature verification in Fulton County, Georgia? Obviously, Trump cares a lot about Fulton County, Georgia. Like, he's a granular dude. The process is going very slowly. At Brian Kemp GA, Pennsylvania just found 205,000 votes more than they had voters. Therefore, we win Pennsylvania. But the important thing here is not my Trump impression, which we all miss, because it's a strong one. I know. But the more important thing here is the coordination. And like that Trump tweet, it's not Trump. That's what I'm making fun of here. Like there's someone trying to Trump it and do it in Trump's voice, but like weaving in an at tag of Brian Kemp is a little bit sophisticated for Donald Trump. Like he would say like the horrible Brian Kemp or something like that. We go on a little bit further here. An email chain at the beginning of January 1st through 3rd, confirms previous reporting that Trump plotted to replace Rosen with a lower-level DOJ lawyer who supported the false claims of election fraud. I want to spotlight this because this is important. This means, and this shows that, there is a deep state of people. I'm going to just use deep state. It's the parlance. I know it's been completely ruined by everyone else who's ever used this phrase at this point. But there is a deep state of people who are very much willing to push and advance through the government, and they know where the levers are, this narrative that Donald Trump actually won the 2020 election. And like that's the thing that kind of scares me here. One last part on this. The unassuming lawyer who worked on the plan, Jeffrey Clark, have been devising ways to cast doubt on the election results and bolster Trump's continuing legal battles and the pressure on Georgia politicians. Rosen and Mr. Clark made their competing cases to Trump in a bizarre White House meeting that two officials compared with an episode of Trump's The Apprentice, albeit one that could prompt a constitutional crisis.
Yeah, the thing here is whether Trump stays or goes, that infrastructure of pushing for taking an election back is going to exist either way. And I haven't seen anyone actually act like they care about doing anything about it. And I think that may be the lasting harm of Trump
I
is that
mean, the big thing that I worry about right now, I mean, if you're asking me, we've been talking about there's so many things to worry about on the domestic front. What do we need to worry about? Or like, what is the thing I want people to be calling for among the Democratic electorate? It's got to be this H.R. 1 bill. H.R. 1, I'm not sitting here and telling you it is a perfect piece of legislation. It most assuredly is not.
yeah,
It's not the ideal, let's introduce ranked choice voting, let's reform the Democratic primaries law or whatever. But the thing that legitimately concerns me, and I do feel like we are on the cusp of a real disaster here, is that we are in a climate where Republicans seem like they increasingly will not accept the results of an election unless that election is administered by Republicans and Republicans win that election.
yeah.
That is the only legitimate outcome that is not without Sturm and Drang. And they will try to draw false equivalencies to people being upset that Hillary Clinton and Al Gore won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're
No,
talking about is like losing statewide elections and being mad at a guy like Raffensperger in Georgia because Raffensperger won't play ball with the Trumpy kayfabe that Trump won. It doesn't matter who voted and how many people voted.
yeah, and the Democrats, it feels like what they're saying right now is we passed the Juneteenth holiday, which that's great. It should have happened a long time ago. But it feels like, we did that and we're not going to ram through the voting rights bill. So, be happy with what you got. I'm going to go cash my check now. That's how the old guard Dems feel to me.
I agree. And this is again why I mean I do see some people, especially among like African American commentary, very much eyebrows up, antennas up, like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" I share their skepticism. My antennas are also up here, but I think it's going to take a more broad-based outrage that like we like early voting, that we want to vote by mail, that like I mean even we want ranked choice voting. I really what I would love to see kind of broadly on our side of the aisle is a conversation, more just constant sustaining chatter about how can we vote better. How can we have a better, more transparent? Because what alarmed me is I didn't throw this on the slate, but I can tell it to you off the top of my head. I saw a thing this week about a Monmouth poll about voter ID laws. And Democrats, liberals, the left have lost the debate on voter ID laws because we didn't try. Now, over 70% of people think that you need voter ID or that it's right and good to require voter ID to have access to voting. And there is an argument, of course, for why that's not right, but no one ever makes it anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not even going to make it because I want you, the listener, to try to play the game in your head of, do you remember what the argument is? Because you can real easily intuit what the argument is the other way.
yeah, the old guard Democrats just do not know how to be an opposition party. They don't know how to organize. They don't know how to attack. I don't know if they ever had it, but they don't now.
Focused messaging, I think, is unfocused messaging, I think, is a left of center disease. Um, if I can be completely honest, I wish we were all better at what am I always envious of the Republicans, bro? They say Benghazi and they say it like for 4 years.
Yeah.
Man, I want some of that. I mean, I don't want Benghazi, but you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
I want me some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Democrats, you'd think they would get it together about something like, "Hey, we're becoming the majority because of the way this things are changing. We should like protect our voters so that we can win elections for the next
This,
20."
this is the thing that really baffles me. It is like this is theoretically too a thing where the progressives and the old guard really have they have different hearts. as to why they care about it. But at the end of the day, they both have an existential reason to care about it. And like that to me is the real nut of politics, right? Like sometimes it brings different hearts to the table to do a single thing. This should be unifying all of us. For the old guard, yeah, like okay, Pelosi's in a safe seat, Schumer's in a safe seat, but like a lot of these senators are not in safe seats. Manchin's
Well,
game, Manchin's game might be flipping parties, but like if you're, Mark, let's say you're Mark Kelly in Arizona, I think you want to make sure the elections are fair because like Mark Kelly, I don't think plans on being a one-term senator necessarily, and I think if he's running for re-election, he would like to win. So I mean, it behooves them, yeah.
Mitch McConnell he's in the same boat as Nancy Pelosi, but he's looking at his party and saying, what can I do with the situation on the ground to give my party the strongest send off I can? And the Dems are just failing in that regard. They just don't care.
Yeah, and it gets back to a broader state and local thing where the party has gotten better at not losing so many state and local races, but like that still digging out of a big hole from the 2010s that they put themselves in.
Yeah.
All right, so that I mean I wanted to spot like that because like there really are glaring things that need to be investigated, and they're not. There's a political reason to investigate them. Keep the pressure on these people. I don't. They did. There are lawmakers who encouraged a domestic terror attack on 1/6, and they should be paying a political price for this. And morally speaking, they should be paying a price for it as well too. But at bare minimum, even if you don't have morals, good politics here dictates that you should be feigning like you do. And it's very frustrating to like not see that happen. Um,
You'd think that voting rights and don't storm the Capitol would be like in the top 5 of their priorities.
that's it. This is another one where like I would also think that you'd think that progressives and old guard would be able to get their brain around too, right? Like that it's bad as a progressive. It's just clearly bad policy to have a system that tolerates storming the Capitol when something happens that you really don't like. Like I mean, if we passed Medicare for all and they went up there and killed 20 lawmakers, we should have a system that penalizes people for doing that.
Well,
So
and that could happen. The people are being radicalized to the point where that's not some absurd thing.
the congressional baseball shooting was like not that long ago. I mean, we now have a number. We have if anything, it is an increasing level of comfort with bringing violence upon lawmakers. And I mean, look, it even gets to the flip side of that coin where I occasionally talk to people who are kind of like, I kind of wish a few of those bastards had got a taste of this just to know what they were dealing with. Like, I hear that. I understand where that person's coming from. Then I always take a step back and go, but we're still getting to the point where we're like kind of okay with lawmakers getting hurt. And that is that no matter how you feel about Joe Manchin, that is like bad. It's a symptom of something bad happening, not because Joe Manchin doesn't have it coming, but because Joe Manchin has it coming.
I think Joe Manchin should never be able to eat in a restaurant in peace for the rest of his life without people harassing him and calling him out for what he is. But if you're okay with like shooting at him, that's how you get 20 years of the troubles.
Absolutely. No. And yeah, that alarms me. All right. Let's finish off on this. I'm gonna do. Wall Street Journal has a nice little summary of Supreme Court rulings here over this most recent term, and I'm just gonna kind of go through a few of them real quickly. We had California v. Texas. Finally, these two square off. Who
In the
wins?
ring.
California wins. 7-2. Big. It's like a baseball game or something. No. So Gorsuch and Alito dissented here, but the majority said that the Affordable Care Act should be preserved for a third time because the Republican challengers didn't have standing. So again, narrow ruling, not like this is wonderful, just that like this was not a valid lawsuit. We actually just talked about that lawsuit. In 2017, Congress removed the financial penalty for not carrying health insurance. The court said that the $0 penalty meant that the challengers weren't harmed, and thus you can't sue. So, like, if you're uninsured now, you can't get penalized for it.
Yeah.
So, the fee tax argument's not available for people who seek to challenge the ACA. That said, the ACA still seems to be in a bit of a financing death spiral. That's going to be a problem to deal with. Next, we have, man, I am fascinated by this. They have Kavanaugh. The Wall Street Journal has ranked the justices from liberal to conservative. Let me just read this off to you. It does this seem right to you? From liberal, we have Sotomayor, then Kagan, then Breyer, then Roberts. In the center, we have Kavanaugh, then Barrett, then Gorsuch, then Alito, then Thomas. In my head, I don't know about you. Of the three Trump jurists, Gorsuch to me is the closest to the center.
Sounds right.
Like, I mean, I just have a hard time going, Kavanaugh is substantially more liberal than Gorsuch. I'm like, on what?
Or Alito.
Yeah,
Like,
well, I mean, dude, Alito's pretty sneaky conservative. He's just like, we've kind of lost sight of him, but like Alito's pretty conservative.
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Bush. Fulton v. Philadelphia, 9-0. This is a voted with the majority thing. The court ruled that a Catholic social service agency was entitled to a city contract even if its religious views prevented it from compliance with local policies forbidding discrimination against same-sex couples. Essentially, this is a religious liberties, religious freedoms case, and even the liberals sided with the conservatives on this. This decision said that the city of Philadelphia unlawfully suspended a Catholic organization from a government-funded foster care program because it would not work with same-sex parents.
Yeah, little cuts, like has been talked about. It's
This is a tough one for the liberals to rule the other way on. I mean, this is
it
the
is.
thing that, like, you're right about little cuts. The conservative, like the ALEC, like that, I forget what the acronym stands for. You know what I'm talking about. The conservative legal group. They're
Yeah.
really good at finding liberal-ish cases that are hard for the liberals to rule against, that serve the conservative aims. They did this with
Yeah.
a Asian punk band several years ago on a free speech case.
Yeah.
I forget what their name was, but I believe it was the name itself that was actually offensive, and they found in favor. No, these judicial activists on the conservative side, they're good at what they're doing.
Well, and
Next,
the conservatives are good at picking cases to push up.
also true. No, dude, it's a smooth operation. They're really good at this. That's why McConnell wanted to focus in on this, and that's like, Joe Drilling, friend of the show, has contended in the past that he doesn't think that McConnell would have done away with the 60 vote threshold for Supreme Court justices, and I think on that he's just dead wrong, because like, this is the game. This is what they are doing.
Yeah.
Next,
Well,
NCAA.
and McConnell said it was his plan for like the last decade. He's said it in interviews.
You gotta take the man at his word at a certain point, right?
Especially when that's what he's doing.
NCAA v. Austin, the justices unanimously, fun word, ruled that strict National Collegiate Athletic Association limits on compensating college athletes violate antitrust laws. Essentially, like, the athletes themselves cannot compete anywhere else in the market at that age, right? So, like, the NCAA is essentially a monopoly when it comes to collegiate sports. There's no parallel organization or association that you can compete against. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't necessarily thought about the NCAA like that, but this could have broad ramifications for the future of college sports. Absolutely.
The college athletes have been getting hosed for a long time while the people running it make a lot of money. But I was surprised that the right wingers all voted in favor of an antitrust anything. That was kind of surprising to me.
I mean, the NCAA is not a conservative darling, but man, this is a really tough case. Who would be the NCAA's competition?
Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
I agree
Nancy,
with
I'm
you.
sure in court they were arguing it was like the NBA and professional sports, and like, well, they don't have the one and done rule and stuff now. But like that, here's the problem. Here's the problem. The fact that the NBA actually has any sort of rules that prohibit them from, and other leagues have rules like this that prohibit them from just picking up athletes right out of there, actually ensures that during a certain window, the NCAA is absolutely 100% a monopoly for athletes between the ages of 18 and 19.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with the ruling. I was just surprised to see the right wingers even saying antitrust.
Yeah, no, I was too. And I think you're looking at this one. This might be the sleeper case of the term here. I think that this will have the Wall Street Journal also says this broad ramifications for the future of college sports. The court affirmed lower court rulings against the NCAA that said that schools could offer athletes better benefits tied to education, such as free graduate school, travel, internship, and academic incentive payments. Yeah, no, big problem. Big problem.
Yeah,
So for NCAA, I think that, a good ruling. Next, we have Mahanoy Area School District versus BL. Probably a case none of us are following too closely. Although this one actually you might have heard about, you just don't know by that name. The court extended a protection over student speech to social media, ruling that Pennsylvania's school district overstepped its authority by punishing a high school cheerleader who used a vulgar word on Snapchat. This is, I mean, I heard this, and as a Replacements fan, I was like, this is the fuck school case, like, which is a classic Replacement song. Fuck school, fuck my high school. Which is essentially what this girl who didn't make the cheerleading team did. She didn't make varsity cheerleading, so then she, tweeted like "fuck school, fuck the softball team." The school punished her for saying "fuck school," and the court ruled in her favor. Here's my question, dude. I would love to know if, at long last, the cheerleader who did all this and like had this court case go to like all the way to the Supreme Court, like, was this really worth it? Like, was this worth the effort? You know?
well, yeah, it's probably probably not, but
I
who
can't
knows?
imagine it is, right? Like to become like known and become like a meme of like, oh, she's the fuck school cheerleader. Yeah.
Who pushed it up though? Like who was the legal team that pushed it up for?
That I don't know. I mean, I picked this because it had like little quickie blurbs. Um,
It was an interesting decision because I guess it was about 10 years ago. There was another Supreme Court decision protecting an employee's right to talk poorly about their employer on Facebook. And so, this kind of bolsters that in a way that's interesting. But yeah, to your point, I wonder who the legal team was on that. Was it the ACLU or was it somebody else? Or
I am taking a look here. I'm looking at my thing or the Wall Street Journal article right here. I'm not seeing a good answer. So I will say I find Br- Breyer does classic Breyerisms here, where he's like, "America's public schools are the nurseries of democracy." Putting aside the vulgar language, listener would hear criticism of the team, the school's coaches, and the school. In a word or two, criticisms of the rules of a community of which she forms a part. Like, I mean, like, look, how about the idea that, like, you should be able you should be able to say fuck school like online, like let's not sit here and be like the child is learning a very important lesson about democracy here. I will say that Thomas dissented, saying that schools historically held expansive powers over student expression, citing an 1859 decision by the Vermont Supreme Court against a student who called his teacher old. uh,
you'd
I
think
want to make it clear. Thomas is arguing that that was rightly decided.
you'd think that Thomas wouldn't want to go back to the 1850s, and yet here we are. I
Thomas,
don't get the guy.
Thomas is he is Thomas. Such insubordination tended to quote bring the master's authority into contempt. That's his language. I want to make that clear. And the court said Thomas wrote that Mrs. Levy's Snapchat served to, quote, subvert the cheerleading coach's authority.
Good.
I like Clarence Thomas, ladies and gentlemen. Clarence Thomas. Next we had, well, I guess we won't do that because it doesn't appear that they didn't even rule on that one. Oh, that's the one they're still considering. All right, we got Center Point Nursery versus Hasid. Supreme Court struck down a regulation giving union organizers the right to visit farm workers on agricultural fields, ruling that the 1975 California measure providing such access violated the growers' private property rights. Now, one thing that came out of this term that has like a very mixed bag here is it is a good term for property rights. And when I say good property rights, look, obviously, if you don't own property, it doesn't help you as much. But there's some Fourth Amendment implications, like involving curtilage and stuff, that we'll get to a little later on here, that are actually good. But they are all part of the same branch of things. And one thing that is very clearly bad is they are using property rights and privacy and like kind of like that sort of thing as a way of going after union organizing here. And this was a 6-3 majority that broke down on the 6 conservatives and the 3 liberals. So Stephen Breyer, please retire.
Well, yeah, and you know that Amazon has 5,000 lawyers looking at every period and comma in that ruling.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, yeah, that one in specific, because they're going to want to figure out a way to really stop union organizing and any real kind of like organizing efforts inside of their warehouses. And yes, you can see how aggressive Amazon is too already with fighting this unionization effort. No,
Yeah.
they're really, but what's interesting is at the same time, I think they also need to be looking at that antitrust ruling too that came down on the NCAA, because that might be something that might be sneaky. And
Yeah,
then conversely,
that could go sideways in a lot of ways that nobody's going to be ready for.
yes, no, it really can. I mean, there's a lot of the Supreme Court. The justices are being fairly clever. The conservatives are being clever about kind of breaking away from each other a little bit strategically, but there are moments of clarity where we can see what they're doing. And yes, there's a long game being played here. And Roe versus Wade still very much in the crosshairs. Next, we have
Absolutely.
AMG Capital Management versus the Federal Trade Commission. The court curbed the FTC's longtime practice of seeking to recover ill-gotten gains in court from companies and individuals who cheat or mislead customers, upending its enforcement approach. In this case, even the liberals sided with it, so it's going to be interesting to see how the FTC goes after ill-gotten gains in the future. Not great. Not
Yeah.
great, and this is exactly the type of thing that one of those things that they try to float up there to get the liberals to have to side with it and put the liberals in a corner here, and then the conservatives get to slice away.
Yeah.
We have Nestle USA versus Doe. Justices ruled that food companies Nestle USA and Cargill cannot be sued in U.S. courts for abuses allegedly committed in the Ivory Coast, where a group of 6 Mali citizens accused the company of obtaining coca from plantations that relied on forced child labor. This is a big blow to labor rights, and creates potentially a very large loophole for multinationals here going forward in labor laws. If you can know that you can house in the United States, and if you're doing this and you take advantage of this Ivory Coast loophole, you can do stuff using child labor, that's a big problem. And here's the big problem here too. The only person who actually sided against this is an 8-1 decision. Take a guess who's the one.
Thomas.
No, Alito.
That actually doesn't surprise me.
Why not?
A lot of times from the right wingers, you'll get them agreeing with the left and with kind of a libertarian angle they'll get there through. So that sort of stuff doesn't actually surprise me much when they're like, this is not on this, but like, this is a constraint of government issue, and I'm siding with the left on this for these reasons. We've seen that a lot. out of the right over the last 30 or 40 years. So I'm never surprised when I see it.
Okay, so I've got the article up here from Wall Street Journal. Supreme Court ruled Thursday that Nestle USA and Cargill Inc. can't be sued in U.S. courts for abuses allegedly committed in the Ivory Coast. The court, in a decision by Thomas, said that the plaintiff's case didn't have enough of a connection to the United States to proceed. Nearly all of the conduct that they say aided and abetted forced labor, providing training, fertilization tools, and cash overseas to farms, occurred in the Ivory Coast. This is the latest in a series of cases curbing the Alien Tort Statute, a 1789 law that authorizes foreign citizens to sue in federal court over violations of international law. Let me see if I can get to Alito's dissent here. Alito's dissent not mentioned in the Wall Street Journal article, unfortunately, because I would have loved to have heard specifically what Alito was objecting to, or maybe he just felt like there was enough standing in that. Actually, I bet you Alito's dissent was, look, this is a law, and it's a 1789 law, probably written and supported by a number of founders and framers, and if you put weight into the founders and framers like that, and you're an originalist like that, and a textualist like that, maybe you just think there's prevailing wisdom there. I'm trying to intuit it. We're not going to get lost in there forever.
Yeah.
Next, we got Collins versus Yellen. The court largely sided with the U.S. agency overseeing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, rejecting an investor challenge to the government's decision to channel the firm's profits to the Treasury Department. But justices also ruled that the Federal Housing Financing Agency was structured unconstitutionally and said that the president must have the freedom to remove the agency's director at will. So one of the big things that's happening here is a further expansion of these administrative branches serving at the will of the president, rather than. This is the thing that's always been kind of confusing about the administrative state in a legal sense, and there's not a great. Liberals don't have a great answer for this, and it's something that we do have to struggle with. In the creation of the bureaucratic state during the 20th century, you start having organizations like the Federal Trade Commission. You have the Federal Housing Commission, these sorts of things. And they are made by Congress. Congress makes these bureaus. And those bureaus are then housed. Essentially, the mandate and the law made by Congress says that the president will execute this law. And the law that they are going to execute is that they are required to create an office inside of the executive branch that requires them to do this specific thing. And, oh, by the way, though, you can't fire the guy who's working there. So there's, bureauism is to get old Max Weber on people, probably a necessary thing. It's hard to imagine a world without bureaus. It's hard to imagine dealing with the affairs of state without bureaus. However, in our own constitutional system with the tricameral thing, where does the bureau actually live? Is the bureau a thing that was birthed by Congress, that the president, as the executor of the executive branch, must dutifully execute as per his oath of office? That is one argument. Or has the law been written and now it is in the president's hands to execute the law as they see fit? And if you're going to say that this thing is in the executive branch, then it's in the executive branch, and I, the executor, have an org chart that serves under me. And you can't have an org chart where you got certain managers who's like freelance Larry over here and freelance Billy over here. Like, I'm the org chart. This is essentially a legitimate constitutional argument that is being hashed out in the court system right now. That I think this is one where reasonable people think I believe can have multiple positions and a wide range of positions that I think are actually acceptable.
Well, and I think Trumpism really kind of brought that to the forefront with people like Chad Wolf.
Yeah, right. So then, Trump's answer, real simply to this, and I think it's the one that will ultimately win out, I hate to say it, is I should be able to fire these people. It's a hard argument to argue against, right? Even the whole idea of, well, no, sir, you should have the ability to nominate that person, but not to fire that person. Here, I'll make a counter argument that you and I are both very keenly receptive to, and it's going to, put us on our heels. Louis DeJoy.
Yeah.
Now the flip side of this is maybe the Biden administration turns around and goes, okay, well, I'd like to fire Louis DeJoy then. And finally get the Supreme Court to give them the clearance to fire Louis DeJoy, which would
Yes,
be good for the post office. Which
yeah. And the country.
yeah, no, for real, and for mail-in voting and that sort of thing too going forward here. So like maybe a silver lining here to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's going to lead to a lot more whiplash. Is the executive goes back and forth between the parties. The president will have a lot more power to change everything every time a different party takes
this
office.
is the argument, right? Like, I mean, so like the affirmative argument the other way, and this is why, like, if someone wanted to do this debate and come on the show and make a strong case in either direction, I'd happily take the other side and just like throw out the best construction I could. But on the other side, yeah, like you and I just lived through 3 or 4 years of Trump hollowing out the CDC, the Obama virus plague book, like the
Yeah,
playbook.
that
Yeah,
was,
like
that
I
was a
got
great
thrown
decision.
out. State Department hollowed out the State Department. I mean, like that was really scary to live through and had real implications and ramifications. So like, no, it's not actually good that he should just be the executive. This is a complicated argument. Like this, I
Yeah,
mean, this is what makes court watching kind of fun. Is that like, this is one of these ones that as a process nerd, I think about a lot. I have a great answer on, and I do think it's fun and interesting to think about. All right, next. I hate this. Edwards versus Vanoy. Justices ruled that when the Supreme Court announces new rules of criminal procedure that benefits defendants, those rules don't apply retroactively to people whose convictions are already final. So even if they go, you know what, you can't admit blah, or you know what, it was wrong to do 10 times the sentencing on crack cocaine as we did for powder cocaine. It will not help the people who are in jail serving those 10x sentences for crack cocaine. I hate that. I hate that, and this was a 6-3 conservative decision.
well, yeah, and you don't think that has anything to do with pot moving towards legalization? Couldn't be.
No, it most certainly does. Right. And I mean, so then the answer here really increasingly is if Biden is going to do this, it is on Biden to do a blanket national pardon.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know,
another thing that we should be calling for clarity on is Biden needs to pardon everyone who is in jail for pot because the court is making it very clear here that otherwise there will be people who can smoke like myself and people who are in jail doing time
yeah.
for owning an eighth of marijuana or whatever and
Well,
like
and it's just so transparently clear that the thinking is, well, if we let these people out of prison and we let them vote, they'll vote for the other team. So we can't have that happen. It,
yep, nope. Last one here. Let's do. Oh, that one they're still deciding. I wanted to talk about that. That's interesting. Americans for Prosperity versus Bonta is going to be on donor disclosure, and can California require nonprofit organizations to disclose the identities of their largest donors? No, that's gonna be an interesting one. I tend to think that Americans for Prosperity is going to win that one. And
I
also,
I have a feeling that I know how the money is speech justices are going to go on that one, right?
well, I mean, like, okay, so that also is a really nice illustration of this conservative judicial activism pipeline, right? Like, we have a money and speech issue that's like very much a Citizens United case that is being advanced by Americans for Prosperity. Like, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to put together this one. um,
There is a through line.
Absolutely. All right, last one. Let's end on a positive note here. Civil litigation, law enforcement misconduct. Tanzan versus Tanvir. This is 8-0. Barrett did not participate. The court ruled that a group of Muslim men could use a federal religious freedoms law to seek monetary damages from federal agents who placed them on a no-fly list in retaliation for their refusal to act as informants in their religious communities or against their religious communities. So I like this in the sense that I like that it seems like civil libertarians and liberals are starting to get the idea that the way we're going to make any sort of headway here in this current court climate is going to be using religious liberty as a tool and
Yeah,
as a weapon to advance our own stuff, to essentially do what conservatives have been sometimes very good at, which is putting the liberals on defenses with conservative cases. We need to use,
exactly.
yeah, we
Find
need
the
to use
common
conservative
ground and push
jurisprudence.
forward.
I'm sorry.
Find the common ground and push forward, like we were talking about earlier.
And as the court continues to put down stare decisis around this religious liberty thing and strengthen it out more, do it more so. I mean, I only quarter jokingly refer to creating a church of marijuana and basically doing a religious freedoms case to smoke marijuana all the way up to the Supreme Court, because I really think if they're going to keep doing strengthening and strengthening and strengthening the jurisprudence around religious liberty, and I think it becomes very hard. And if the Church of Marijuana, yeah, I don't see that happening. But these
Well,
are
and there
it's
already
collateral.
are several religions who do that. Like, there are several indigenous religions who have stuff like that.
And there was
It's
a case in the '90s where Scalia ruled in favor of smoking peyote. Scalia, of all people.
yeah,
So like no, like this is actually. I mean, there is more jurisprudential textual support for my Church of Marijuana like thought experiment than like maybe meets first blush. But yeah,
yeah,
just a thought
yeah.
here.
Right now, with the way the court is, if you just pass a bill on it, you're likely Medicare for all or marijuana. If you just pass legislation, you're likely to get struck down by the court, and now you're in a worse situation.
Yes, I mean, I think the best case scenario right now is probably like with ACA, marijuana, and a number of other issues. The court's just going to punt, like Robertson. But the problem is, you only need four to have cert. Cert is the court hearing it, and prior to this, when they had five justice majority or whatever, like they really like don't like doing cert if they don't have like five people. Like they want to have some consensus to hear this. And yeah, I mean, the other thing is, look, Breyer's old, but so is Thomas. And I'll tell you what, if Thomas passes, whoo, whoo, it's gonna be a fight. It's gonna be a
I notice you
street
say
fight.
I notice you say if passes because we all know none of these people are ever going to retire. They're just going to die where they
No, they're
stand.
just gonna die on the bench, right? I mean, like, yeah. Here's a good place to end it. I mean, I've talked about it before, but I just increasingly am a convert to term limits. It's so obvious that there are positives and negatives to term limits and not having them. But to me, it's so clear that the way our system works, you need term limits on the courts, you need term limits in presidency, you need term limits in Congress, and there's no benefit to having these people entrenched in. Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, Stephen Breyer, Clarence Thomas, these are not special people. They're not.
Yeah.
They're just people in power. And like I do think we'd be a better country and better governed and better have better jurists and everything if we had that. All right, you're grabbing your cat. I am grabbing my cat, and I've got Hazy the cat here. It's time for the cat close. It's time for the cat close. Our cats are saying farewell to everyone. Yuffie, I know I love you too. Tell them she's purring. Okay, tell them where they can find the show. Yuffie says that you can find the show at don'tworry.tv. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Stitcher. You can find it on Spotify. Yuffie is a big iTunes. She likes to leave reviews. Don't you like to leave reviews? I like it when you leave reviews. She leaves very, very cute reviews. Very tiny and cute reviews. Oh, I gotta put her down. But you can also go to patreon.com/DWATG and you can see Yuffie for yourself. You can see Robert's cat. What's your cat's name?
Monty.
Monty. All right, I got Hayes here in the background too. You can see Hayes' shadow is at the beginning of the show. Everyone but the Chesterfield cat was in there. His ears perked up when I mentioned him because he's a bit of a diva. But yeah, so anyways, go to patreon.com/DWATG. A buck a show is all I ask for this product here. We do the video, trying to get more shows out. There's, as I said, a monologue show. There's a big panel show. There's me and Robert. So if you like one, two, or a few, all the Don't Worry About the Government is there for you. Look at that, a rhyming couplet. Robert, are you still surrounded by bears and piranhas and thus sans internet access?
Yes, I am. I'm actually digging a moat around my house to thwart the Comcast installer.
Yeah. And so, as such, you can enjoy Robert and his views here on Don't Worry About the Government. I want to thank all of you so much for listening to the show and supporting the show over at patreon.com/DWATG. I will be back sooner rather than later. We'll take a look at Myanmar and maybe some of these other stories that like we talked about earlier in the year. I'll go through some of these slates and look at some topics and see if I've got some follow-up stuff so that things don't just like fall through the cracks. I want to be that kind of show for y'all. Until the next one, bye-bye.